The views expressed in this review are my own. I encourage everyone to pick up a copy of the book and read it for themselves. What I like, others may not, and vice versa. If you would like to read or critique my own work, I'll leave a link in the description. I welcome all comments and criticisms. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're reviewing another classic today, and I want to do things a little different. For this book, I want to cover the story section in a bit more detail, and by that I mean I'm going to cover the whole story. I will include timestamps if you wish to skip the spoilers in this 80-year-old book, because today we're reviewing A Clockwork Orange, a title that has always made me think about those tasty dark chocolate oranges that pop up around Christmas time, or at least it did until I read the book. An important note, I went into this story blind. I've never seen the movie, have never been interested enough to look up details about the story, so what you're getting here is 100% what I took from the book, with no spoilers beforehand. I also want to answer a question the author poses in a small preface at the start of the book as to whether the 21st chapter was necessary. Starting with the story. Alex is a teenage gangster. He and his friends Pete, Georgie, and Dim are dressed up like a couple of discotheque nightmares and are heading into the world to cause mischief in Bedlam. Alex, our narrator, takes special care to tell us how their friend Dim is just that, Dim. But he's also a savage fighter, and that's pretty much why they keep him around. Alex and his three friends are out terrorizing the populace one day when they run into a man carrying some books under his arm. The four young men surround him, and Alex begins by acting nice and interested in what the man is reading. Then they take the man's books, tear them up, beat the man, rip out his teeth, strip him of his clothes, and throw his money to the wind. I want to make it clear that at this point I wasn't sure if that's what was really happening, because the whole book is narrated by Alex, and he speaks and thinks in a thick wall of invented slang. We'll touch more on that later. They go to the poor district, or the Slavic district, I'm not entirely sure which. Here they rob a shopkeeper and Alex cuts up the man's fat wife. We know she's fat because Alex takes time to add insult to grievous injury. Convinced in his own dismissive way that the savage beating and cutting they gave the store owner and his wife are survivable, they steal all the money, candy, and other goodies out of the store, leaving the shopkeeper and his wife bleeding on the floor. Satisfied with their bit of extreme violence, for now, they take off to the milk bar for an alibi. This, if I'm deciphering the slang properly, is a place where they give you milk laced with drugs. Again, I'm not sure of this. 60s British dialogue can be hard to decipher at the best of times, and this is imaginary British slang invented in the 60s, spoken in a hypothetical dystopian future. The boys buy their alibis by bribing some old women with drinks, something that appears to be a custom. After a short trip, they decide their taste for blood has not been quenched. Alex proceeds to beat up a singing drunk at the back of a bar. The man is so drunk he basically tells Alex to off him. He wants to die because the world has gone to hell and he doesn't care anymore. Alex gives the man a few more thumps and knocks him to the floor, then kicks him till he throws up. Then he continues to kick him until he starts vomiting something redder and thicker than beer. I can promise you this was not what I was expecting from a book that's title reminded me of one of my favorite holiday candies, and so this is where I'll leave off with the spoiler-free recap. If you don't want to hear what happens next, you can find the timestamps in the description. There are far worse things to come, so I felt it best to spare you some of the more horrifying details. This isn't something I intend to do for every book, but I don't feel like I've covered all I want to cover. I'm questioning my choices in reading material as we continue. Leaving the bar, they run into a rival gang led by someone Alex calls Billy Boy. Billy Boy apparently smells like fetid cooking oil. We know this because Alex goes on at length about it. Then the boys pull out knives and chains, or what I think are knives, and go at it, slicing, beating, and kicking each other. At least until the cops show up. Then all the boys scatter like roaches. If you don't agree these kids are vermin, don't worry, you will. The boys decide they need a ride to clear their heads, so they go to the cinema and steal a car. They leave the city running over what I believe was described to be a dog, then stop to harass some lovers in a field who thought they could escape the Grand Theft Auto simulator the city had become by leaving it. The boys leave, running over a few more animals they didn't think important enough to identify until they come to a house. Not done with their mischief, they decide they're going to have some fun and play Home Invader. Alex leads the group and knocks on the door, pretending one of his friends is sick. The woman who answers doesn't want to let them in, so Alex asks for a drink of water. The woman turns away for a second to confirm with her husband. She makes the absolutely unforgivably horrible mistake of not shutting the door, teaching us all that a chain on the door is no substitute for it actually being shut. Alex takes off the chain, and inside come he and his terrible little friends. It turns out an author lives here with his wife. The author is working on a book that shares its name with the book we're reviewing. Alex laughs at the title and proceeds to do what he does with books and tears it up. The author is incensed and tries to take control of the situation. He is beaten for his trouble. Two of Alex's friends who went to raid the kitchen return. Alex is disgusted at their appearance and tells them to drop the food they're eating and help. Next, these four 15-year-old boys take turns doing something to the author's wife I can't mention on YouTube. They also force the author to watch them do it. At this point, I was having some serious questions about the author of the book, but more on that later. The boys finish up. They're tired from pretending they're Genghis Khan and his horde and want to go home. They all feel rather tuckered out, except for Dim, who rather enjoyed himself. The car is running out of gas by the time they make it into the city, or it's breaking down from the damage it sustained from running over multiple people's pets. Either way, the boys drive the car into a river and catch the train home. As they prepare to part for the night, Dim gets a little bit uppity with Alex. But after a short confrontation, they decide it's best for everyone to go get some sleep and deal with everything the next day. Alex goes home, but he's not quite ready for sleep. He decides it's best if he listens to some of his favorite music first. Being late at night, I'm sure he's listening at full volume. He makes a note that he's already terrorized his neighbors into silence. He listens to his records, and with his last distraction out of the way, he's off to dreamland. He has a dream his friend Georgie is a general and Dim is his right-hand man, Alex being nothing but a grunt subject to being terrorized by the two. The dream troubles Alex, who is not sure what to make of it. At least not until his dad tells him the next morning that he also had a dream. One where his son was broken and beaten and left lying in a gutter by the side of the road by the same boys he used to pal around with, his father being unfamiliar with Alex's usual activities. Alex decides to skip school that morning and go back to sleep. He wakes up a little later and starts on his breakfast, when he is visited by what sounds like a mix of a truancy and parole officer. The man is concerned not only with Alex skipping school, but some of the activities he suspects the boy to be up to. Alex puts on his best good boy act and tells the officer there's nothing to worry about, that he's a good boy now. The officer is unconvinced, but he's also overworked, so he leaves by basically saying, straighten up or prison. Alex takes this rather stern warning and decides to go to the record store. He is delighted that a record he's been waiting on is finally here. There are also two girls around his age who are all giggly and bubbly and acting up. Alex decides to take them off to lunch, he gets them drunk, and again does some very not safe for YouTube stuff to them before they can sober up. As if I needed more reason not to like this character. Dismissing the girls, Alex heads off to meet his friends. When he arrives, there's a bit of bad news. Georgie doesn't like the way things have been run, and wants to start taking on more serious jobs. Alex tells them he's the leader, as every group needs a leader. Dim agrees with Georgie, to which Alex puts him down. Then there's a bit of a power struggle. Alex pulls out his knife and spends some time showing the others why he's in charge. Believing them properly chastised, Alex decides to humor his friends and go on the job Georgie wants to do. This takes them to an upper-scale neighborhood. Alex tries his usual approach to get in, but it doesn't work on the old lady who answers the door. She shuts the door, locks it, and returns to her life. Alex, being the thug he is, finds another way into the house. A few things to note about this old woman. She lives alone, she's got a lot of cats, and she's that particular brand of old woman that would fight a grizzly bear over a ham sandwich. Alex finds out this last bit a little late as the old woman attacks him for invading her home. Alex tries to fend her off and is promptly attacked by the old lady's loyal army of attack cats. Alex finds his usual tricks don't work and resorts to more excessive violence. For a moment, I was convinced the old woman was going to win and chase him out. But youth beats out experience and Alex knocks her cold. Then Alex's friends come in and return the favor they owed him from earlier. It appears somebody has called the cops, so his friends beat him up just enough so he can't get away. Alex is only partially aware of what's going on. That is until the cops grab him and haul him off. They also rough him up a bit for good measure and, let's face it, because he deserves it. It turns out the cops have been keeping a close eye on Alex and crew, just waiting for them to slip up. And slip up they did. It turns out Alex was a bit too rough on the old woman because she died. Around this time, Alex's truancy officer shows up. The other officers offer to hold Alex down so the newcomer can get in a few shots. The truancy officer, who it turns out really did want to save the boy, is so disappointed he spits on him and leaves. After this, Alex is shown to his cell. We don't get a lot of information about the trial. It boils down to his mother crying, his father's disappointment, and the ease with which they put Alex away for a few decades. Then it's off to the overcrowded prison. We find out here that despite Alex trying to incriminate his friends for setting him up, it doesn't work. Georgie died on another job, and Alex hears almost nothing else about his other friends. Alex adapts to prison life by becoming a jailhouse snitch. He tells the chaplain of the prison things the other prisoners are doing, as well as stories he just makes up. The chaplain then tells these stories to the warden. It's here we find out that there's a new method for getting prisoners out of prison faster. Alex asks the chaplain to get him into that program. The chaplain tells Alex he doesn't want it, that it's a horrible thing and he shouldn't ask him any more about it. Alex takes this information and completely ignores it, determined to find a way into this program. We cut to Alex's cell, a cell designed to fit 3 but is housing far more than that. A new guy is brought in. He is loud, weird, and annoying, and he tries to take Alex's bunk. But none of the others in the cell are having it. Later that night, Alex finds the man has snuck onto his bed and is either doing or trying to do some very unsavory things. Alex shoves the man off, and I believe the cell beats him a bit and everyone returns to sleep. In the morning, the new prisoner is dead. They suspect it was a heart attack, but I suspect it was the beating. Everyone is locked down extra long this morning, and when they're let out, we get to meet a new character. The Minister of the Interior. He just happened to pick this day to tour that particular prison, and decides Alex will be the perfect candidate for the new program that reconditions prisoners. Alex is excited despite the chaplain's obvious trepidation. Alex is taken to a new facility. He is given a nice comfortable cell all to himself. He's given new clothes and given good food and a vitamin shot to restore him to full health. He is then escorted to a room, strapped to a chair, and forced to watch extremely violent videos. It's during this time he starts to feel sick. He suspects it was something he ate, but as the video continues, he feels sicker and sicker. This process repeats each day. Alex is given good food, a shot, and then forced to go into a room and watch the videos while feeling sick. One day he notices they've added some of his favorite music to the videos. He cries out that it's a sin to associate such violence with such beautiful music. The doctor running the experiment is intrigued. Alex wants to give up, but he is assured he has less than 2 weeks to go and then he'll be free. At one point, Alex tries to stage an escape. But in the middle of tricking the guard, the nausea overcomes him at the thought of violence, and the guard laughs at him. Then I believe he punches him for good measure. Finally, the day of release comes. Alex is given back all of his stuff, including his knife, and hauled to a stage, then presented to the press. He is then attacked by someone he doesn't know. Alex can't bring himself to be violent as the thought causes him pain. After a prolonged assault, Alex offers the man his knife if he'll stop. The doctor calls off the man, proclaiming success, then brings in an attractive woman. Alex wants to do his usual activities to her, but he gets sick at the thought. So he falls to his knees and begs for her to sleep with him. After being thoroughly humiliated, he is given some money, patted on the back, and promptly kicked out of the institution. Finally free, Alex decides to go home. The problem is he didn't tell his parents he would be released, and it turns out they've taken in a lodger. The lodger seems to have grown rather fond of Alex's parents over the past few years and tries to throw Alex out when he arrives. Alex, being incapable of violence, leaves after discovering all of his possessions were seized and sold by the state after his crime. Upset by this, he decides to off himself in a non-violent way. Since he doesn't know anything but violence, he decides to head to the library to find an answer. He can't find what he's looking for, so he picks up a Bible and starts reading like he did in prison. This brings him no peace, and he starts crying. Someone asks him what's wrong, and Alex says he just wants to off himself. Alex is shushed, but the person he's talking to seems concerned. The conversation continues until the man who keeps shushing him recognizes who he is. And Alex recognizes the man who's been trying to get him to be quiet. This is the man from the beginning of the book who he and his friends tore the teeth out of. One thing leads to another, and soon the whole library is trying to do to Alex what Alex did to the old woman. Alex can't defend himself, and the old men in the library can't seem to do much damage, so Alex tries to escape. Then the police show up and start beating the old men back. Alex is momentarily relieved until he sees who the cops are. His old enemy Billy Boy and his old friend Dim are now police. Hungry for a little payback, they stuff Alex in the back of their car and drive him out into the country. Then they give him the old workover where no one can see it. They leave him by the side of the road and head back to town. I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same. Alex stumbles around in the dark looking for help. He comes across a familiar house and knocks on the door. When a man answers, Alex begs for help, saying he was beaten by the police and left for dead. The man is sympathetic and brings him in, cleans his wounds, warms him up, and feeds him. It's during all this that Alex recognizes who this is. This is the author whose house they ransacked and whose wife we won't discuss much of what they did to his wife, except apparently it was so bad she died. The man doesn't recognize Alex because he wore a mask the last time he was there. The author gives Alex a place to sleep, promising to contact people who can help. While he sleeps, the author writes down everything Alex told him over the meal and puts it into a piece for the local newspaper. He hopes to use this to bring down the current government. Alex finds out about this when he wakes up and is asked to read and sign the article. Alex signs it, but lets a few things slip that make the author suspicious. Then the author's friends arrive. Perhaps sensing danger, they swiftly remove Alex from the house before the author can puzzle out why Alex seems so familiar. These men share the author's conviction to take down the current government and put Alex in his own apartment. He tells them he just wants to return to who he was before the treatment. The men say they will do what they can for him and that they will take care of him, then they leave him alone. Almost like clockwork, a neighbor starts playing one of Alex's old favorite pieces of music. He is excited until the nausea kicks in. He beats on the wall to stop them, only to have the neighbor turn up the volume. Alex decides to finish what he started at the library and end it all. He goes to the window and throws himself to the gentle justice of the concrete. Sadly, hard falls aren't what they are in literature, what they are in real life, and Alex lives. He wakes up in the hospital and quickly discovers the concrete not only didn't kill him, but it deprogrammed him. He is now back to what he was before. Then a bit of sub-divine intervention walks through his door. The interior minister comes in with some of his goons. This time he's all smiles and help. He tells Alex the author puzzled out who he was and what he did. But Alex shouldn't worry because the government is keen on arresting dissidents, and they've already taken steps to throw this author in prison. He then offers Alex a buy-off. In exchange for his support, Alex will be given a job and be taken care of, which boils down to being allowed to return to the monster he was before, but now with a government sponsorship. Alex accepts, not even reading what he's signing, poses for a picture, and spends the rest of his time healing up to return to the streets, cured. We reach the last chapter, and Alex has a new gang that looks a lot like his old one. But things don't feel quite the same. Alex feels like there's something missing. While paying for the usual drinks for the old ladies at the milk bar, a picture of a baby falls out of his wallet. His gang teases him for it. Then Alex calls off the day's planned activities, letting his boys off to do as they please. Alex runs into his old friend Pete, who is now married and has a job. He's an insurance salesman. Alex is astounded and a little jealous. After the meeting, he decides that what he wants is a child and a wife. That the listlessness he's been feeling is him growing up, and dismisses everything he did before as being young. And that's where the story ends. That's the story summarized to what I took from it. There is more in the book, but that's really all I wanted to recap. I have a lot of thoughts about this book, but let's start with what I liked. First things first. Despite what I may say later, this book is well written, as is expected of older books. The structure is cohesive, the story is engaging. After parsing through the slang which felt almost indecipherable at the beginning, I could follow most of the story. This, at least, I can appreciate after some of the good books I read last year, if Amazon's bestseller list can be anything to go by. Given the density of the slang, I have to applaud the author in making things as understandable as he did. I'm not sure I could have done the same. That being said, the characters were fairly believable despite some of the awful things they do. I would also like to compliment the grisly details in the book. Many authors will tell you a character is evil, but few will show it so deftly as this book did. Alex is undoubtedly an evil character. He shows it through his actions, the way he preys on the populace around him. Even when not explained, you can tell his philosophy is might makes right. Alex does what he wants because no one around him can or will stop him. He's vicious in a way that only spoiled children can be. His cruelty is a casual thing. He's doing what he sees as natural, bullying his way through the city, causing harm he dismisses with disgusting ease. Further, you can see where his actions are leading him. Alex is blissfully ignorant of the forces against him. He has no concept as to what the likely outcome of his brutal actions are. He and his group take part in their bloody games with the same level of mirth and abandon. Dim also felt like a real threat. Alex plays him off as simple and easy to control, but he fails to see the real danger in him. Alex's brutal show of dominance when the others ask for a say in what they do shows how little he thinks of his droogs, as he calls them. He's so caught up in how superior he is, he doesn't see the obvious danger in the violent people he surrounds himself with. I also want to add the cops in this world feel like they belong here. I've read many books where the cops are just stupid and evil. Here the cops feel like the type of people who've had to deal with people like Alex their whole career. Being in hard situations will often make you hard. Dealing with terrible people will turn most of us into terrible people. The one exception being Alex's truancy officer. I call him that because I never wrote down his name. This man really seemed to care, but was so crushed by the hopelessness of his situation. He's trying to save so many with so little. It felt like a little piece of the man died when he heard what Alex had done. Moving on to my dislikes. I've held off long enough, time to talk about the slang. I really hate when authors invent slang, and this book is a really good example of why you shouldn't use slang in your books, let alone start making it up. I honestly couldn't make out what the main character was saying for half of the first chapter. At times, it felt like I was listening to a foreign language and not just slang moving into a different dialect. There was a part at the beginning I thought the main character and his friends might be heading into an immigrant district, but it may have just been the poor side of town with an abnormal amount of grandmothers. It took a few chapters to figure out half of what the main character meant, and I'm still not 100% sure about some of it. The more violent parts are the clearest, and while I want to cover the violence, I need to talk about the slang a little bit more. I'll be honest, if I weren't reviewing this book, I wouldn't have finished it. It's the same problem I have with several of the books I read in school. If the language is difficult to follow, boring, or both, it makes the book really hard to finish. I don't want to work to read a book. This is supposed to be a leisurely hobby. Let's move on to the main character. I can't sympathize with Alex. He's a brutal monster who, in my opinion, wasn't punished enough. I know the book has a message about dystopian violence, but Alex crossed the line and became unforgivable a long time ago. Alex doesn't do violence because something is messing with his criminal empire. He doesn't do violence because he has no other option. He does violence because he thinks it's fun. He robs people for money with absolutely no regard for the consequences. He and his buddy engage in involuntary, un-YouTube-friendly acts with such disregard it's upsetting. There's no build-up to the violent things he does, because he's a monster. It's not just that he's doing it for fun, it's that he feels like he's been acting like this for a really long time, to the point that it's become commonplace for him. He's like an English Uday Hussein. Even when he's being punished and basically tortured, I can't feel sympathy for him. When he's released, it's only the conditioning keeping him in check. It's like having a man-eating tiger on a thin leather leash. It doesn't matter if the leash holds, you shouldn't feel comfortable with that thing around, knowing what it has done, knowing what it likes to do, and what it will do should that flimsy protection break. To be honest, there's not many sympathetic characters in the book. I originally felt sorry for the author until we meet him the second time. This is when he decides he's going to use Alex in his mission to bring down the government. He has no other thoughts in his head aside from that. He doesn't stop to think why Alex went to prison, the terrible things he's done to end up where he is, or why the cops singled him out for a country ride and work over. Granted, the cops in this world don't seem too picky about who gets a beating. But after what the author has gone through, I'm not sure why he even answered the door. This kind of thing happened to him in the past. It ended up with his wife dying and him being traumatized into the crazy demeanor he now has. So I'm going to talk about the only two characters that I kind of liked from the book. And that's the truancy officer and the Minister of the Interior. The only reason I like the Minister of the Interior is because he's actively looking for a solution to the nightmare that's going on around him for political gain. He's a monster of a different sort. He picks Alex because his crime of introducing an old lady to Jesus by means of percussive maintenance was particularly heinous. He later bribes Alex because he knows he can turn a bad situation into an advantage and get rid of a bigger nuisance in the process. As far as the truancy officer, he's just sympathetic. He's overworked, probably underpaid, and unable to be the change he wants to see. Most of what I mentioned before will seem pretty standard things to dislike. But there's one thing in particular I dislike about this book. Sadly, it also has to do with the last chapter. The one the author was so upset was removed. At the end of the book, Alex basically blames everything he did, the murders, the beatings, the theft, and the non-consensual YouTube unfriendly activities, he blames it all on being young and not knowing any better. This would be like a dictator blaming his genocide on an accounting error. Alex didn't do what he did because he was young. Yes, it has been shown that young men need guidance, and historically, the most destructive force in society is disaffected young men. Alex is something different. He does horrible things to people for pleasure. He goes out of his way to look for victims. Granted, that doesn't stop him from taking targets of opportunity. He's a terrible person who did terrible things, and he gets no sympathy because something bad happened to him. So let's move on to my thoughts. There's one thing about this book that really gets my brain rolling. I usually don't like to attribute things happening in a book to an author's beliefs or mindset. Many of us write about dark things or scenarios because such things are interesting as a spectacle. This book has something in it that's a little different. The author in the book, whose wife was, experienced to death by Alex and his buddies, well, this author's book shares a name with the book we read. It's where Alex first hears the term a clockwork orange. Well, the author in the book is forced by Alex and his friends to watch as they did what they did to his wife. I don't want to say this is the author's barely disguised fetish, and there's a very good chance it's not. Usually, not always, a barely disguised fetish is brought up over and over again, hence the barely disguised part. But most don't have this clear of a setup. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, but it feels like there may be more of the author in this scene than would be usual. Moving on to what will be my favorite subject of this review, Alex isn't punished enough. I've gone over what he and his friends did. That doesn't change the fact that the 2 years he spent in prison and the 2 weeks he spent being conditioned were not sufficient punishment for what he's done. Today, you can hardly browse Twitter or the news without seeing people who've committed heinous crimes in line with things that Alex and his friends have done and received what amounts to a slap on the wrist for it. That makes it rather hard for a book to be dystopian when it's something you see happening regularly in real life. That being said, we don't always have all the facts, and I'm moving on to the rest of my point. I may be going on like this because I'm aware of more crimes than Alex is actually being put on trial for. That doesn't change the fact that Alex is not sorry for what he's done. Even when those who are actively using Alex's story to take down the government say they'll take care of him, he shows no pity for the things he's done. He just wants the conditioning gone so he can return to the way he was. He actually tells these men he wants to go back to the person he was before his imprisonment. I get this is dystopia, but even those who act like they want to fix it don't seem like they care about what they may be releasing back into the world. On to another thought. I'm not sure how to feel about this book. On the one hand, it's certainly a well-written spectacle, despite the slang problems. The story was an experience, but I'm not sure I'm better for having it. The world is consistent, and mostly feels like the pieces fit together in a satisfying way. On the other hand, the main character's unlikable, unsympathetic, and downright evil. I don't have anybody to root for. The world feels depressing and ripe for the type of authoritarian government that looks set to take power. I know the book is trying to pass a lesson on to me. I just don't feel like it proved its point. The crime and punishment theme is always a popular topic of discussion, not just in fiction, but in real life. Perhaps my perspective is skewed from experiencing people like Alex from the wrong side growing up, but I really can't sympathize with them. The book wants us to ask how far is too far. The problem is, what they did to Alex feels way too light. I could make a 45-minute video on that topic alone, but it would do nothing but cause needless controversy and leave me in a bad mood, so I'll simply say the book did not convince me that Alex's punishment was what made the book dystopian. What made the book dystopian was Alex's freedom, his government endorsement, and the prospect of him breeding. So let's answer the question the author posed to us at the beginning of the book. I can understand the frustration at being told your book should have ended a chapter earlier. I don't believe the author meant for chapter 21 to act as Alex's redemption, more his revelation. Either way, I think the publishers in the US had it right. The 21st chapter was completely unneeded. The story ends where it began at the end of chapter 20, then goes on a bit too long into chapter 21. Alex's life basically returns to what it was with the exception of him being endorsed by the government and feeling listless. His inevitable revelation is just the dismissal of the horrible things he's done and a prediction of horrible things to come. The only thing that Alex wants now is a child, but having a child does not suddenly make you a better person. Alex has not resolved to go on the straight and narrow and become a productive member of society. He just wants a kid because his old friend is now married and trying to be a normal person. It's pure jealousy and will not have a positive end. Lastly, I have to admit, the fact that I wanted to cover so much of the book and have so much to say about what happens does speak positively about the book. I may hate the main character, the world he's in, and not know if I would recommend the book, But its problems aren't structural, or even related to engagement. The book is well written, engaging, and only overly long by a chapter. I don't regret picking up the book, but neither can I say it will improve you outside the novel. I guess a novel can be something in itself. Good luck, everyone.